All right. So we are, I'm in Indianapolis. Brett is actually at DePaul University. He's got a business meeting later today. So the power of technology connects us, and we're recording for the students to watch later. So really appreciate you joining, Brett. Give you guys the students some background. Brett and I have been friends for a long, long time, and he's been an entrepreneur for a long time, and we talk a lot about business. We also have a lot of fun together. We do a music festival together and hang out. And so I'm really grateful you took some time, Brett. As I told you before we hit record, a lot of our students have some awareness of sustainability and lean, but it's really a 100 level intro sort of class. So any topic we can talk about. And I know you've been doing this a long time, both yeah, I think as an employee even before you even started your business. I think you were in this. But so our first question, and thank you so much, students, for sending in your questions. They were really, really good. We're obviously not going to be able to get to all of them, but we've pulled about, I don't know, 10 or 15 out, and tried to kind of have one from each student. So that was fantastic too. But this first one was just maybe, Brett, if you could give us just your personal interest in recycling, waste reduction. Did you know all along that was what you wanted to get into? Kind of how did that come about from a career path for you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks, Kyle, for having me, and thank you, everybody, for your interest. Basically, my passions were focused on being outside, working with my hands, being outside, trying to figure out a way to contribute to maintain or make better the surrounding environment. So it spun off from there, and more than you can point to a number of factors, but I look at the opportunities that I have created or been a part of have been the result of just making constant communications and constant networking with people and with companies. And over time, as you get to know these people and these companies, they open up to you. And essentially, my company, both my businesses, started out of a problem that a client or customer had. We have this issue, and it is we have these modest back early 10 plus years ago. The sustainability goals were much more modest and not as high reaching as they are today. So I'm not saying that the challenges were easy back then. There's still challenges either way, but as I knocked on doors, as I built relationships and started talking to people, and not only that, but also learning about their manufacturing processes, how they make their widgets or how they make their sellable products. And with that knowledge and building that relationship, they would come to me. And it all started actually where I'm about to go here this afternoon in Greencastle to Boots Unichim. It's a cement kiln manufacturer. And about 13 years ago, at the time, he was a technical salesperson, but he came to me because we had built a relationship up. I somewhat understood his production process. And he came to me and said, Brett, we are about to run out of this raw material, and I need you to go out and find this material. So essentially, that was 10, 13 years ago. And fast forward to 2025, and here we are. So has it always been a passion? Yes, it's always been a passion to try to do something to better the environment, to better my local surroundings, to make, I guess our parents always told us to, when you leave something, leave it in better condition than when you first got there.
Yeah, yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, the those relationships in any sort of business, are critical. But I think it's even more critical when you start talking about sustainability because there's a certain sort of vulnerability when you're trying something new, right? And and we're going to get into some of the challenges in a little bit. So I don't want to trump our question, but I want to revisit some of those challenges of do we trust each other enough, and what if we fail at this, and whatever. So but before we get there, let me give another question here. Was more specific to your food and organic material. Just try to give us a little understanding of where that product's coming from. And maybe tell a little bit about your machine. That's super cool. I got to finally see it. It took way too long to see it, but
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that food, maybe, and maybe where is it not coming from? Like maybe that we're not getting it from restaurants or we're not getting it from wherever. So talk a little bit about that if you wouldn't mind.
So yes, we are in every sense of the word a small business. Greener Organics is located in Coldwater, Michigan, and we strategically aligned ourselves, or we strategic. I'm giving ourselves more credit here, but we strategically aligned with the manufacturers, wholesale distributors, and warehouse folks. I say strategic, but honestly, that's our bandwidth and what our capabilities are from a personnel standpoint. And I'll dive into a little bit of that with the retail locations. Everybody I know is going to be familiar with Meijer, the grocery chain, Target, Kroger. When you start to talk with and potentially provide a solution for the retail space or in the retail space, that requires a tremendous amount of resources and person power. You need to have a small team of people, both on the technology side or the sales side, as well as on in the back of the house from an administrative standpoint. We don't have that structure. So what our target, if you will, would be, like I mentioned, the food manufacturers. So before it goes to the retail center, or before it goes to the retail store, or before it hits the the restaurateur or the restaurant's tables or their kitchens, that's the niche that we have connected with, or that's the segment that we've connected with.
And when you talk about the Myers of the world and that requiring kind of a whole higher level of logistics and whatnot, is it the physically of getting the product from them to your machine? Is it? I know there's just so many locations. Is it the customer service side? Is it all the above? What does that make? And would you see your business in the long term going into that, or is there just not enough product, not enough demand? Tell us a
No,
little bit more about the challenges with that retail side.
well, the biggest challenge, and this isn't overemphasizing it or over being over dramatic here, but there is more food waste out there than we are. Greener Organics are capable of handling. So the volume is, sadly, but it's the reality in this country, the volume of potential food waste to recycle or beneficially reuse is tremendous. But in our situation, most, if not all of like I said, all of the waste product that comes to us comes by way of the Kroger distribution center or the Kraft Foods manufacturing facility in Ohio. For whatever reason, the product does not meet their specifications. It could be out of date. In some certain sad situations, mentioning the Krogers or the Myers or the grocery folks, when they bring in material from their suppliers, they have a very tight specification for temperature and quality. And if the material comes in on that truck and the temperature is just a couple of degrees too warm, from a liability standpoint, that retail company, Kroger, Whole Foods, whomever, cannot receive that or accept that and then distribute it to the retail centers for sale. So that's where we step in.
Yeah.
And you had asked in a previous question too, our machine, where if this is a good time, I can go. I
Yeah, I
can be
love it.
brief.
Yeah, I love this thing. This is
But we
great.
have we are a standalone facility, and I can get into that a little bit more later. But essentially, what we are able to do is we can take the whatever the food waste may be in any kind of packaging, with the exception of glass. We essentially feed the entire, most of everything we receive comes in on a wood pallet or a skid. And we take the shrink film off, which is used in transit to secure the product to the pallet. Once that film is removed and recycled, we can recycle that and do. The entire pallet, contents and all, box, packaging, all gets dumped into our separator. And our separator it's a mechanical process. It doesn't shred anything, but what it does is it just pulls and tears and opens similarly on how you open up a bag of potato chips. You don't just rip the bag open. because then everything goes flying around. But you strategically and surgically open it up so then you can get to the good stuff. So that's essentially how our machine works. So it opens, tears, and just stretches open whatever the container is, or pops open the milk jug, the yogurt cup. And then it mechanically squeezes that material to the tune of our input, our throughput is maximum is 20 tons an hour, is what our machine is capable of operating at. So for some perspective there, on average, a truck that delivers waste product to us weighs 40,000 pounds or less, between 30 and 40,000 pounds, which is 15 to 20 tons. So not always in practice, but in theory, we should be able to, within an hour, run that entire truckload of material. But there's other factors that slow us down. So back to the mechanical process. We open it up. We don't shred it, cut it into small pieces. We just tear it, open it, and stretch it. Squeeze it into our separator cabinet. It's a vertically oriented cabinet. If you're familiar with a top-loading washing machine, you have a slotted or an outside basket, if you will, that has slots in it or screen. And in the middle of our separator, we have a bladed agitator. And what that bladed agitator, it does multiple functions. One, once that product gets into the separator chamber, which is vertically oriented, those blades hit it and essentially just macerate the organic material or turn it into a slurry. But it's beating it. It's not cutting it. It's not slicing it. It's just beating the heck out of it up against that slotted screen. So that's the first function that the agitator does. The second function is it as it's spinning, and as it's spinning, it's creating centrifugal force, and it applies that force to the organic fraction or the food. And after it pounds it, turns it into a slurry, that centrifugal force slings the organic matter through that inner screen I just earlier described, through that screen, and then it hits the inside of the cabinet. And from there, the organics, the yogurts, the cereals, milk products, any dairy product, slings through the screen, hits the inside of the cabinet wall, and then it falls down into a trough. And from there, we direct the liquids to our tanker or the solids to a catch basin. And then the third function that agitator applies is the blades that hammer and smash the food also are canted at an angle that creates an updraft. So the packaging or the inorganic fraction, it also gets slung to the inside of that screen, but because it's bigger size, it hasn't been shredded, it's just been stretched open. It hits that screen, it doesn't pass through as the food does, and it then creates that spinning agitator creates an updraft. And all of the food packaging, inorganic fraction, gets sucked up, and then it hits a floating auger that grabs it and diverts it away from the organic fraction of the food waste. It's challenging to explain. It really is easy to see and understand it visually when you're there. As you
Yeah,
can.
no, you did a great job. I think you crushed it there. I think they have good sense for it. And
Okay.
but to maybe to give them another sense of it, the uniqueness of that machine. When you got yours, I don't know what yours, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah, it's going on. It'll be 7 years old in October. And
That's a
when we took,
yeah.
when
When
we
you
took
got that, tell them a little bit about how unique that is. And they're just it's just I think it tells the story of innovation and how new this stuff is really going
yeah,
on. So
yeah, which we can draw from on some future questions here as well too. So yeah, when we took possession, or we took ownership of it, it was delivered. It was fabricated, assembled in Italy, and shipped over from Italy. Both the machine itself, as well as the truck, the trailer, and the driver, all of them came from Italy onto the boat. Received it through the port of Baltimore. And then we took possession of it in October of 2018. And at that time, we were serial number 10. So there were only 10 units in the North American continent, which is, of course, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. And at that time, we were the only machine that was capable of handling both solids or dry material as well as liquids. We were set up to handle both. So we did some research. We evaluated other similar types of equipment, and we settled on this machine because of its ability to handle multiple different phases, if you will, or different food, whether it be solid or liquid. We felt that to be
Yeah.
very handy. It allowed us to, and with the 20 ton per hour estimated throughput rate, we were, from a business standpoint, time is worth money. Actually, time is priceless, but you have to do a cost analysis because that's how you, down the road, that's how you calculate your productivity, which then feeds into your profitability.
Yeah.
So we made a decision with this machine for several reasons, but main reason, ease of use, ability to handle the liquids and the dries, and the fact that it's arguably it's fast and efficient and effective. So we can get it in, get it through, get it out, on to the next problem.
And do you have any sense, this is another good question was sent in. Do you have any sense of, kind of how much food waste you have diverted, that in your time with the machine and all of that? Do you guys track that? Do you have any sense for, just for how much volume of food of waste now did not end up at a landfill because it came through your process?
So I reached out to a colleague of mine. Unfortunately, he called me right as we were getting started. But he handles, yes, we do report back to certain clients that ask for it. One of our grocery retailers that we work with, we report back to them on a monthly basis. Not only do we report back by weight what we've recovered, but we also have a calculation. We partnered with Michigan State in Lansing, East Lansing, and specifically worked with Dr. Kirk. And he gave me it's a proven formula, but it's an energy production formula. So many pounds of this type of organic material will produce so many kilowatts of electrical energy or power. So we took that equation and we basically each month we record the tonnage that we bring in, plug it into this equation, and then we are able to report to our client not only the tonnage that was diverted from landfill, but this is how many kilowatts you created, which very easily we convert into, that's the number of households that you powered. So I can give you a rough, and I should know this by heart, and I don't because it's constantly increasing. But on average, we divert between 14 to 25 tons a month. So let's go ahead and split the difference and say it's probably closer to the 25 tons per month.
Okay.
And that is just the organic fraction. So that's what's measured.
Oh yeah, that's going to include your packaging then.
Doesn't include the package, the weight of the packaging or the weight of the
Yeah.
pellet or the shrink film.
So the impact to the actual, if you were going to send all that to a landfill, the impact would be even significantly higher than that, because the packaging is such a big part of that weight, right?
Well, actually, no. I mean,
I mean, in your number, it's not, but the real number, the actual number that a landfill would have to deal with would not be that 20 tons, right? It would be
right.
20 plus, basically.
It would be, yeah. If it didn't come to our facility and it didn't run through our machine, yes, they would be tasked with and burdened with the entire weight of that load: paper, cardboard, plastic, food, and everything. Yes, yeah.
Okay, another question. Is there, and I should know this just from knowing you, and I don't think I even know this answer myself. But is there any seasonality to your on the organic side? And then also, is there any seasonality on the greener opportunity side?
So for the organics piece, the business, the greener organics, I would say that it's not so much of a roller coaster ride. There are some dips, there are some valleys, and there are some peaks, but we learned through the 2020 pandemic that that business will survive and did survive through a pandemic, a global pandemic. And it's quite simply, people have to eat. We have to eat. So because of that need, I mean, it is a core need, a primal need of ours. There's always going to be the business case for producing food. Everybody's got to eat. So that's a long-winded answer. There isn't really any seasonality, but what we do see are seasonal goods.
Yeah. Yeah.
January and December, January, and this is a fact. This isn't. We see a lot more pumpkin spice flavored
Yeah.
items. That is truth.
Yeah.
And then towards the beginning of October, end of October, beginning of November, we see a huge spike in pumpkins. We receive in and beneficially reuse by the truckload pumpkins. A lot of your seasonal vegetables and probably more seasonal fruits. We'll
Okay.
see a lot of the watermelons when when they're ripe and they hit but they don't sell. So it's a delayed. So that's from a seasonality standpoint, it's the actual food material that we receive. But as far as the actual volume of business, it stays consistent. Whereas for the green opportunities Indiana business, there is some seasonality to that. We are tied heavily in with the cement manufacturing industry and the cement kilns. Their peak sales is when there are multiple construction projects, and that's traditionally in the warmer months. There isn't a complete and total stoppage in the winter, but they do have a significant slowdown. So they're not producing as much of their cement powder because the outdoor construction project season slows in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah. I
stop, but
gotcha.
it slows.
Yeah. I had another good question with regards to, kind of your relationship, your outlook, your either a collaboration or not collaboration with a traditional waste removal company like a waste management or I don't know who's some of the ones around here that are
Republic
that are
Services was mentioned too. Yeah.
yeah. So is there any crossover at all? Like, is it adversarial? Like, what's the relationship with a traditional waste management company?
You can easily think that and assume that it would be adversarial. However, in the right market, the most of the waste haulers, traditional waste haulers and landfill companies, there is some humility. They do understand that clients do push the sustainable goals, and they do have waste management is famous for it. Of course, they have unlimited resources and unlimited funding, so they are only limited by their imagination, if you will. Republic Services is a little bit like that too. But when you drill down to specific markets, we have been able to be a complementer to some of the traditional landfill companies. But we do tread a little lightly because we do compete against or compete with them for the same pool of business. But a lot of times though, the client dictates, because the client or the customer is going to say, hey, Brett, we need to be so much percentage landfill avoidance. So the Republics of the world, waste managements of the world, here locally, Raise Trash, although they were acquired by Waste Management, they're held to their customer standard. They can't deviate from that. So that's where we become a complementer too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's an orchestrated, it's a dance.
Yeah.
We got to be just respectful of each other's core business and capabilities. But
Yeah,
it,
and let's talk more about that too when we get down to some of these challenges, about are they a threat? Do you envision them? We'll get back to that when we get a little further down these questions. A couple other ones here that I think we want to talk about. One of the students said, are there materials that you just simply can't, we mentioned glass, but are there other materials that you just simply can't work with? Um, and and do you try to figure out what you can do with them, even if it's on the greener opportunities business? I know that that business thrives on finding some discarded materials that maybe is waste to someone else and yet can be a power source to
Yep.
Boozy. But are there deal breakers? I remember you talking about I think it was the foil cups in coffee. You couldn't take that because of the fear of getting some aluminum inside the organic material. Yeah, tell us
Right.
a little bit of stuff like that.
Well, I can't tell you too much because then I'll have to kill you and you'll know all of the trade secrets. However, no, so we'll split it into, because we do have the two businesses and each have, so yeah, we mentioned the glass earlier. The other, where the simple rule to apply for the organics recovery business, greener organics, think of it this way. If it's challenging for you as a Homo sapien, a biped
With thumbs.
with opposable thumbs. So we can take apart a lot of things with our hands. However, if it becomes challenging for us to open it with our hands, that's a I feel that's a key indicator as to, well, if we can't do it with opposable thumbs, I've got a square machine with a round hole and a lot of angles and unusable space. More than likely I'm not going to be able to open it either. So to bring in a real example, the individually the Velveeta cheese slices,
Yeah.
we can get
Yeah.
them over, but you gotta kind of pick at that little
Yeah.
thin cigarette plastic, whatever they call that.
Yeah.
You gotta, those are always a challenge. And it just comes down to another basic differentiator for us is if it's thinly sliced and compressed or stacked, it's going to be difficult for my machine
Yeah.
to
That
separate.
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Now uh, items to avoid on the green opportunities business, Indiana business, as I commonly refer to it as. Let's throw out the obvious. Anything hazardous, and that could be a RCRA, EPA hazardous, carries any kind of a hazard waste code that requires specialized training to handle it, dispose of it. Anything like that, we cannot and do not. I typically do not handle. I have in the past with previous and as in a previous job. I'm trained, was trained, and accredited to manage that stuff. So we try to tend to steer away from high hazardous materials, your universal wastes, batteries, bulbs, shirts, biohazards, things like that. We tend to, the obvious we don't really want to get into. Now there are businesses and there are companies that have created business out of finding ways to beneficially reuse or convert that material into a usable product that can harness the energy and use it as a fuel. That takes more time and more resources than I have available to me. So those are the obvious ones. Other than that, anything is worth attempting to evaluate and experiment with. It's just going to come down to what your client has the bandwidth, what their time frame is, how patient are they. Right now, I'm working with, like I said, I'm here in Greencastle at DePaul University. I'm going to go meet with Bootsy here in Greencastle. We are evaluating scrap carpeting.
Oh.
Utilizing scrap carpeting, not all of the carpeting, but a certain portion of the carpeting, and sending that here to the cement kiln that they can then use as a alternative fuel or a green fuel.
Yeah, because the
So
carpet's got a lot of
really,
petroleum in it, right?
yeah, it's plastics. A lot of it
Yeah.
is a lot of vinyls, a lot of poly long strain plastics. Not so much polycarbonates, but you're no
Because help
HDPE,
the
probably high
yeah,
density
yeah,
polyethylenes.
yeah, because help the audience understand that the whole dynamic inside Boozy is they've got to create so much heat that there's just they're using a lot of heat sources and they're trying to be just more sustainable in how they choose to
Right.
develop that sort of heat, right? Isn't that kind of the ultimate goal they're doing?
Well, so they're pulling on, or they're being forced to pull two levers, or so yes, they create a tremendous amount of heat, roughly, well, not roughly, right around 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. They essentially take raw materials, limestone, sand, shale, and other naturally occurring products. I sell them some alternative raw material, and they crush that, and then because of that intense heat that's needed, they literally turn it into a molten lava, or it converts it, it melts glass. Essentially what it does in that process, I can't go into too much detail just because I'm not that familiar with the chemistry. I can tell you that the chemistry has been around since Roman times. They've been making concrete since Roman times. And so I won't lose my train of thought, but let me back up a minute because there may be a need to clarify. I'm talking to and working with cement kilns. Cement kilns produce cement powder. That is one of the major components that is needed to make concrete. Concrete is the finished product that we see we're surrounded by. We drive on it, we walk on it, the buildings are constructed out of it. It provides shelter, all the way down to it can be used in decorative applications for landscaping. So it's important to understand that cement is only a component of concrete. So the cement manufacturers, yes, they consume a tremendous amount of energy to produce and maintain that consistent heat of 2,600 degrees. So the levers I mentioned earlier, they have to pull, they are constantly being pressured because of their consumption of fuels, fossil fuels. They're governed, they're regulated. And because of those regulations, they have to try to find creative ways, alternatives to utilizing the fossil fuels like natural gas and or coal. This facility here in Greencastle also has the ability to burn liquid hazardous waste, paint thinners, paints, any kind of alcohol-based, solvent-based wipes, cleaners, line flush material. They burn that as a fuel as well. So that helps them reduce their dependency on fossil fuels. It also helps the generator that then doesn't have to send that hazardous liquid. And it's so that's they were forced to do that and have been doing that for decades. Another lever that I think, and this is my professional opinion, a lever that they are forcing their production facilities to pull or to put pressure on them to pull is there's a competitive advantage and to providing and selling green cement or carbon neutral or lower carbon produced cement. And it's just like keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. There's multiple cement kilns throughout the country. There's not a lot of them, but there's enough to sustain and fulfill the needs here domestically, as well as we do export. And they're in some parts of the country, they do import cement. But they need to keep up with and have the competitive edge. And what they do is that they find alternative fuels that help lower their carbon footprint, so to speak, or their carbon consumption, which allows them to market some of their cement as a not carbon neutral, but a lower carbon consumption, greener product.
Yeah,
So
and then tying right back into that is you mentioned your Indiana business providing them some alternative raw materials.
yes.
That's also a double win. Can you explain that a little bit more too?
Yeah. So what we do, we basically bring together two industries. We have as mentioned, the cement kiln industry, and I will be brief and basic. The cement, like I mentioned, they've been making cement since the Roman times, so thousands of years. And the ingredients needed from Roman times up until now, The basics haven't changed. The applications and the efficiencies, obviously, with technology has changed tremendously. But you basically look for, you need calcium, silicate, you need iron oxide, alumina oxide, and then you need a silica base or a sand. So alumina oxide, iron oxide, calcium, and silica. Those are the four. I don't care what cement kiln, whatever part of the world it's in, they're going to need those four basic components. Now, how they get those, limestone is the source for the calcium. The silica is the sand. Where the challenges that they're faced with are acquiring sources of the alumina and the iron. And what I've been able to do is, so I've bridged the gap. I also partner and work with utility companies, specifically those utility companies that burn coal to generate electrical energy. And the byproduct of that coal, it's no different than your charcoal grill at home. If anybody uses charcoal grill, you have that ash that's left over. So they have essentially three components or waste components that they generate at a power plant. And you see them when you're driving down southern Indiana, the big exhaust stacks. It's very clear. I want to be very clear here. Those are exhaust stacks. That's not smoke. It's steam. It's exhaust. So those exhaust stacks, the three components that they generate, they burn the coal, the ash is created. I then am able to utilize that ash as a raw material replacement. That ash has high levels of iron, and some not so much, others high levels of alumina. So those are the two key components that they are able to utilize from the coal ash that I market. So there's bottom ash and fly ash. There's basically a granular ash and a very light and dusty fly ash. And then the third component that these utility power stations generate, that the giant exhaust stack that you see, inside of that is a series of nozzles. And what they're spraying is, they're spraying not a chemical, but they're spraying a material that's created, a liquid material that's created from crushing limestone. And what happens is that slurry is sprayed into the exhaust fumes, and that creates a chemical reaction, or it basically knocks out all of the bad actors that are in that exhaust. And what's created then is what's called synthetic gypsum. And I won't go into too much of the chemistry behind that, but that is the third component. And that's what I market into the cement kilns, that they utilize that as part of the finishing process of manufacturing their cement.
It's so cool because it goes all three of those items that you just mentioned are really a hassle for the power company, right? They just got this waste. We're done with this stuff.
Huge burden.
Just get rid of this, right?
Mhm.
And I guess I would assume it would go to some sort of landfill if it didn't go to Boozy, right? And so just another repurposing and reuse thing that's really cool. All right, I want to wrap up here. I really appreciate your time. I want to jump into some of these challenges.
Sure.
And again, we're not trying to talk politics here, but what is the role in your mind, both currently and in the future, for things like regulations? Are they helping your business? Are they pushing things in the right way? Or is it creating some sort of bureaucracy, red tape that's actually making it harder to conduct business? Kind of what role do you see legislation and some of those regulatory things happening?
So for the greener organics, the Michigan business, the regulations, there aren't as many. There are some local, state level laws and regulations that everybody must follow, or that not everybody, but most businesses have to follow. I think a better way to try to walk through this with you is, this space now, the sustainable space, is so mature. Schools today, I'm completely envious of your students, I'm envious of the students that are on this campus here in DePaul. I'm especially envious of the students that are at Purdue University, where I studied and graduated from. The environmental engineering, environmental science program there is, oh my goodness, the technologies and the sustainable practices and processes that they're teaching today and learning are just, it's fantastic. So I say that because we have evolved over a very short period of time. And through that evolution, it's almost become more of it's just what we do now. Businesses, it's just what we do. We are sustainable now. So, but by no means am I saying there aren't any challenges or any regulatory hurdles. There certainly are, but I'm just speaking in general, just general terms, trying to keep it pretty basic
Yeah, it
here.
seems the way you're describing it, there's a reasonable balance right now between
Right.
um, the natural business climate having an appetite and interest in increasing their sustainability practices,
Yeah.
and yet legislation not really getting in the way of that, maybe not demanding it, but also not really getting in the way of it. So it seems to be kind of balanced right now in your mind.
In my mind, it is, and I think what it is, early in this in my career, one of the bigger challenges that we face, it still comes up from time to time, and we talked about it earlier with the landfills, and especially up in Michigan, our a lot of times we are unfairly compared to the landfill, and we're anything but a landfill. And unfortunately, we are also held to the standard sometimes of what it costs to take stuff to a landfill. And early in the business up in Michigan, I maybe probably was a little too intimidated by that, and I tried to keep my costs about the same as a landfill. I bring all this up because early in my career as well, what we're doing, what you're learning about, what you're teaching, Kyle, is not a traditional. Being sustainable isn't a traditional solution. Throwing it in a hole in a landfill, that's a traditional solution, and it's easy. Here in this country, it's relatively affordable because of the amount of space and land that we have available to us. So early in creating this company and working for other companies in the sustainable space, so to speak, it was challenging because we were trying to get customers and clients to be willing to spend more than what it was costing to throw into the landfill. Those days, although, and those issues still come up, but it's not, surprisingly and thankfully for your students and new professionals that are getting into this industry, when you sit down with a client, their number one issue most times now is not cost. So that was a major hurdle early on. That's not so much now. Where I feel the regulations are really starting to hit pretty hard is from the standpoint of the Indiana business. I mentioned coal earlier. Coal is it's not the idea. It's an ideal fuel source from its just the energy production standpoint. And in Indiana, people don't know this, but Indiana is ranked in the top 10 of the United States for coal production. We have several coal mines. Southern Indiana, we're probably in the top 5 or top 8, I believe, of coal producing states in this country. People don't know that. And so because of that, it's relatively accessible and
Yeah.
inexpensive. But unfortunately, the environmental impacts with coal or other fossil fuels, that's where the regulations obviously are focused on. And yeah, not to get political about it, but there are some political pressures that come from Washington, depending who it is, depending on who it is in the White House. But there are still regulations. There's still these utility companies still need to do what's right and what's best for their environment as well as for their paying clients and customers. So there's still, regardless of any political pressures, there's still going to be regulations in place.
Yeah.
They are a major challenge, and probably not in my lifetime, possibly in my children's lifetime, maybe my grandkids' lifetime. the Indiana business may not be around or may not be operating as large as what we're operating. What I mean by large is probably not diverting as much material out of the landfill into these cement kilns that we are today. That's gonna, as they shut down these power plants, my hope is that they find an alternative to the coal-fired energy that's produced. And when that happens, yeah, there's going to be less and less of these coal-fired utility plants that are open, and there'll be less product to get.
Yeah. So one last question here, Brett, and this is like a really macro level, at a real high level. If you were you had a little magic wand and you could kind of make something happen that would be in the sustainability world, in the environmentally conscious world, that would have a real positive effect. Where do you see some of those new innovations or new things that are going to happen that you think are really going to make a difference? Both one, they're going to make a standalone business that actually can make money, and it's not just a or a nonprofit sort of be nice thing. But where's that innovation at? What do you get excited about? What do you think is going to happen that people could be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, both businesses, the Indiana business, Michigan business. Well, I'm excited about both. Still passionate about both of them. I get up in the morning. Some mornings are harder than others, but that's more age than passion. Um, I'm going to probably focus more on the greener organic side of the Michigan business, because that is there's a lot of exciting opportunities that we could have access to, and to be completely humble with you, what we're doing today for that business is really pretty simple. Diverting it to an anaerobic digester or utilizing it as a feedstock for soil amendments or compost. That's really pretty simple. It's not hard to do. It's complex on how the machine works. So, but that's where I'm excited, because one of my goals with that business is to take that organic fraction. And like I said, it's easy to just send it down the road to a digester. It's great, but there are better things, or I should say more profitable things we can do with that organic fraction. I want to be able to monetize that, and it does have monetary value in the right form. So there are technologies that already exist that are on the shelf that, when applied, it's going to take time and some research and experimentation, but there are known technologies that are out there that can further refine that organic fraction. Removing some of the water is one of the bigger components that is in most all food waste that we see and handle. So removing a large majority of the moisture, trying to get out all of the finer bits of plastic that do make it through my separator, and then taking that and altering the physical state or physical form of it and pelletizing it. And from there, if it meets certain nutritional criteria and physical criteria or lack of moisture, at that point, we could possibly generate a feedstock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or the compost, taking it on a smaller scale, creating a compost, uh, finishing the compost, and then taking that, putting it into a bag, and then literally that truck that comes in from that retail grocery store or that distributor for that retail grocery center, they drop off their discarded, out of date packaged food. I take that off that truck, and then I put on that truck sellable bagged soil amendment that they then return to their store shelves, that their customers can then buy and use in their gardens and their yards. So
Yeah.
that's what's called it. Well, I'm sure you've talked about it in your other classes and discussions, the circular economy.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that.
So, being able to have the resources to do that, have the person power and the team of employees to do that, that's what's one of my challenges. So what I'm doing today is fun, but it's quite, it's basic and simple.
Yeah.
So I know
Yeah.
that. So that's my challenge is
I don't think it's simple. I think it's simple to you because you're in it. I think it's
uh,
really, really cool. And I was so glad that you took time to walk the students through it, because I think one of the things that I try to do in this class, being a 100 level class, is just to get people to just to see what's even out there, right? Just to learn that there are a lot of companies, big giant companies and small companies, that are trying to make their way through this kind of sustainable space. So
right,
so
right.
I really appreciate your time. Hope your meeting goes well today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so I'll let you go. I'm going to pause the recording, and I'll say bye to Brett, and then I'll jump back on and do my lecture. Yeah, go ahead, Brett.
Before you pause it too, Kyle, and I hope I'm not overstepping here, but feel free my contact information if it's
Yeah,
pertinent.
yeah,
I'd be open to fielding additional questions, sidebar questions, challenges. I can relate to your students somewhat. You say some of them are in a different walk in life. When I got out, finding a job in this space was a huge challenge. So I can appreciate if some of the students are having challenges like that. I'd like to make myself available anytime off hours, off out of classroom. I hope you don't mind me offering that.
yeah. No, that sounds great. And I'll basically just push something out on the Brightspace with your email or whatever, so
Please.
they'd have that, and then they can reach out directly. So appreciate you, buddy. Have a good rest of your day.
You too, Kyle. Thanks.
All right, I'm gonna pause this recording, and then I'll say bye to you here, Brett. Let me pause this recording. All right, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. So definitely, if you did, shoot me an email or something. Let me know, because obviously with no one on the call, it's it's hard to gauge, uh, you know, hard to engage the engagement. So let me know. I will push out Brett's contact information in case, as a resource, he can help with anything. We're going to jump into making sustainability stick, chapter 6, and I think it's a pretty straightforward chapter. We'll breeze through it pretty good, and then jump into chapter 12 of the Toyota Way, and get you guys on your way. So starting on page 125 of my book, just talking about the business is being held back by a combination of things: time, resources, budget, and authentic management support. So we're going to be talking about the management support a lot in this chapter. And moving over to page 130, it says management cannot just say that sustainability is important. It has to demonstrate its commitment through its actions. Um, and he's got it bolded, and I highlighted as well. It says employees will become disillusioned if they feel as though they're being asked to do something, but leadership won't provide the time or resources or show the commitment necessary to be successful. I like to think about uh, parenting in this regard. So, like as a parent, I have 4 kids, and so you're constantly saying some things, and yet you're doing other things. So you're saying, "Hey, don't do that." I'm going to punish you if you do that, but you don't really have the energy to follow through on that. And now your actions are in conflict with your words, and that is can create a problematic environment. And same thing with the sustainability. If management's giving lip service but not following through with actions, so if management's claiming to give you full support, but in reality they aren't, show them a different issue within the company that is a priority, and then compare and contrast the level of engagement you're receiving to show the gap between their actions and words. So again, he's saying if you're in the sustainability space, the management's saying, yeah, we're in support of you, we want you to do a great job, et cetera, but yet you don't feel supported, and you look around and you say, okay, well, that's actually what they care about. Maybe it's a quality initiative, I don't know. And you're like, look at all the resources they're putting towards that area. It's far more than what they're doing with sustainability. You can draw that comparison to them to try to get them to adjust. So how can they show some support, right? Well, obviously budgeting is a big one. We'll talk about it a little bit. The time and resources, um, their messaging. Do they praise our sustainability team or our green team, or what we've accomplished? Do they praise that publicly? Do they show up themselves to try to be involved? Okay. Are they factoring in sustainability into some of their strategic decision making? Meaning, yeah, we could go with this route, but in a few years we really should be switching over to this. So let's go that way now. Okay. And then finally, if things don't work out, we do a an initiative and maybe we don't get the results we'd hoped. Do they blame the green team or does management step in and kind of take some of that heat? They use the author's term, provide air cover for some things that don't work out. So let's look at some of these. So budget. Again, author just points out if they're serious about it, they're going to fund it. I mean, unfortunately, in our workspace, especially we're high capitalism sort of environment or culture, if it's a matters, they're going to put money into it. If a company wants to implement sustainability and make it stick, it can't do it. It can't be an unfunded mandate. So again, if we want to do it, we got to provide some funds. Okay. Uh, what if the budget's less than we need? Well, that's probably is going to be the case because, again, we've got to be innovative. We've got to be scrappy. Um, we can find other areas of common interest with another department to try to spread those resources further, or maybe tap into some of those departmental resources. Different budgeting sort of thing. So, and then again, be aware of that if the budget is tight, then maybe we do need to start small, meaning literally a smaller project so that we can afford to be funded so we can actually have success doing it. Over on to page 132, it's talking about the battle between budgets. It just talking about how it's a challenge because management will want to say, oh man, I don't want to cut into my budget. I need all the budget I have. I barely can afford what I'm doing right now. How am I going to take on this additional expense? Oh, and then that expense isn't really going to pay off for me for another year or 2 years. So they're going to be hesitant, obviously. And so the author quotes another gal that says, asking people to think about the business and getting them to think more broadly about other departments and the rest of the company is very difficult. Would totally agree with that. Meaning, um, you know, people get in their silos. They get in. I care about accounting and finance, and that's all I care about, and that's where I'm working. And they don't want to think about how what their work does, how it crosses over to other functions of the business. Sustainability is no different. So I might be interested in a project that I can control. It's right here in my own little department, but I'm not interested in a project that's going to go across all departments. It can be really hard to make that case. So if we can get some of the budgeting actually put into the capital budget, now not in a departmental budget, but on a broader capital budget, sometimes we can have some success that way. Make it part of the normal business cycle. This is on page 133. Again, and Brett kind of emphasized this in his talk, which was great to hear, that sustainability is becoming more and more mainstream all the time. But it used to be we'd have our big corporate structure, decision, strategy, all that. And then over here, we talk about sustainability. And what the author is mentioning, what Brett's talking about is no, that needs to be embedded in the entire discussion. In our normal business cycle and our normal budgeting, we want to talk about our sustainability initiatives. The other thing was cool. I not remembered this from the last time I read this book, but developing your own internal fund. Kind of a cool idea where they're saying, hey, take a nest egg of money, some amount, set it aside so that it can fund sustainable projects. But then have the return on investment, the money that those sustainable projects save you, have that poured back into the fund to fund future projects. And I kind of like that idea. Next, time and resources. Again, time may be most important. Obviously, money is another resource, but you might need things like support technologies or whatever. But obviously that the limiting of those becomes major roadblocks. And a common theme here in the middle of the book, it says they have support of their bosses as long as it doesn't take time away from their current job. So it's like, yes, we are all for you and your sustainability initiatives. Just don't slack on your day job. Well, I mean, that's just not really realistic, right? I mean, I need to be able to put energy into this to have it be successful. I may even have to put some money into it or definitely some time. And yet a lot of businesses are still saying, yeah, we don't really have the time for you to do that. In the short term, employees can work extra hours and pull heroic efforts, but eventually their energy and enthusiasm will begin to wane. It's just human nature. We can only put in so much kind of free time, if you will. Provide time to innovate. I love this. I wish more businesses would do this. 3M has been the poster child of this, where you're in 3M, you're 15% of your time you're allowed to work on whatever you want to work on, and again, it just adds a culture of innovation. It gets people thinking. It also gets their day broken up. There's just so many positives to it, and obviously it provides innovation. Over to 135 here. Prove it out. Small wins build momentum. So you can develop a pilot project or a prototype to prove out your ideas. Again, think about a skeptical boss you're talking with, and you're just lip service, rah, 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 you're like Charlie Brown. That is not going to get you as far as, let me build this out for you and show it to you, right? Again, even if it's a small pilot project, it's maybe 1/10 of what you really want to do. It's going to show results both in your ability to deliver those deliverables, and then what does the process do? How does it save money? What's its impact? So these small wins will build momentum and demonstrate the possibilities that sustainability can bring to your organization. You know, use the analogy of everybody wants to be a home run hitter in baseball, but the real value of baseball is people who can just get base hits and get singles. We can then this small win starts to show us a business benefit. So now it's not this charitable thing. It's no, this is good for our business. Brett mentioned, that Boozy is trying to stay ahead of competitors with regards to the lower emissions cement that they're making. Okay, and again, nothing makes the case better than results. Moving over to 138, small wins help breed success because they begin to make what might seem unattainable goals more reachable. Totally get that, right? I mean, it's just like when you start a diet or an exercise routine. You don't start, thinking I'm gonna run my 24-mile marathon or whatever, 26-mile marathon. I'm gonna just start with a walk this afternoon, right? And so then we're gonna get some points on the board, get some success going, document what we've done, why it's working, okay? Because he points out that we want to definitely write down what happened so you can build off of those successes, but also so you can speak truth later on. So that you have a language, and your team and your management has a language for even talking about these sustainability initiatives. So, all right, so that's chapter 6. Another little housekeeping thing while I pull up chapter 11 here in the book. Keep in mind that next week is your midterm. I'll be getting those questions posted out by the end of this week. Probably make the midterm available. I'm guessing Monday morning, leave it available all week, sort of thing. But you are going to want to turn in your handwritten notes. So you have to turn those in before you take your exam. Obviously, I'll have a timestamp from the submission of when you submitted it. So again, if you've just got things highlighted in your book, you can't have your book open during the exam. So you got to take that information and write it down in your own handwriting, and you'll get points for that assignment, just uploading what you got. If you didn't take any notes, there's a little phrase you'll put down and you'll sign, say, I didn't take any notes, but then you still get your 10 points for that assignment. So make sure you're taking time to get that done. All right. Chapter 12, Principle 6, Standardized Work. I always find this chapter interesting and challenging at the same time. And we'll talk about it as we go through here. But it says, for a production person to be able to write a standard worksheet that other workers can understand, he or she must be convinced of its importance. So it's an interesting thought that and he's going to make this point throughout the chapter, the writing down of standard work procedures sounds pretty dry, unemotional. It sounds very tedious at times. And yet, right out of the case, right out of the bat, this Taiichi Ohno is saying, no, it's an emotional thing, because if I am emotionally connected to the importance of each step because I've done it and I know why I need them all, that connection will actually make me more likely to document things better and improve things more consistently. So it goes on here on 140, likely to respond to the idea of standardizing their own work in the same way. kind of this is a normal pushback, right? We're creative, we're thinking professionals, and every task we do is a unique project, so we can't really put it down. And even workers on the assembly line believe they have a knack for doing their job the best their own way, and that standards will simply set them back. And you want people to be prideful in their work, right? And you want people to feel special, that they do have a skill set and a capability that is uniquely their own. And yet I'm going to walk in and say, nope, everybody's following this same standard procedure, and to a certain extent strip people of that pride. And so we have to be aware of that simultaneous to saying, here's our current standard work procedure, we also know that you're going to think of another way in the future, and we have a whole system of Kaizen to allow that continuous improvement to happen. And that's a really hard challenge. Still on 140 here, it says standardizing tasks become a science when mass production is replaced by the craft form of production. So again, remember, we used to be artisans and everything was hand built. And then we started getting into some of this mass production. And then when mass production takes on, that's when we also start seeing the whole science of management, which was like Frederick Taylor was the theory, the scientist who started implementing that. He started doing it with the time and motion studies. So again, just tracking what everybody's doing. But then what would happen is, and this again, some of the history, some of the baggage that we all still carry around, the open and honest worker would share their practices with the industrial engineers, and then they'd quickly find their job standards raised, and they'd soon be working harder for no extra money. So like they would go around, they'd observe, they'd find these are the best ways to do it. And then they'd make that the new normal, and everyone would be kind of resentful because now everybody's working much harder. Often efficiency and time studies that changed the job description and responsibilities led to union grievances, became a major source of conflict because between management workers. So that's the history we have of these standard work procedures. We don't come from it in an innovative standpoint. We come from it from a command control standpoint, and that resulted in a lot of hurt feelings. But then they reference that even Ford, who some would argue was part of the problem of applying this sort of scientific management model of Taylor's to the workplace. This author is saying, hey, even Ford didn't really intend it to be that way. He says today's standardization, this is Miller 141, is the necessary foundation on which tomorrow's improvements will be based. If you think of standardization as the best you know today, but which is to be improved tomorrow, you get somewhere. But if you think of standards as confining, then progress stops. And that's just a really thin line there, right? And that's what we got to be aware of. So bottom 141, he tells the story of the training within industry, which was kind of a program put together after World War II to increase production. And then the belief that the way to learn about industrial engineering methods was through application on the shop floor, and that standardized work should be cooperative effort between the foreman and the worker. You see how that shifts now slightly more towards innovation and continuous improvement, and a little bit away from command and control. And so the Toyota way of going to the source, observing in detail, and learning by doing, were all very much influenced by this training within industry and became the backbone of Toyota's standardization philosophy. Flipping the page to 142, says our standardized work consists of three elements: tack time, which is actually the time it takes to do your job, the sequence of doing things, and how much inventory or stock on hand the individual worker needs. So standardized work was never intended by Toyota to be a management tool to be imposed coercively on the workforce. Standardized work is the basis for empowering workers and innovation in the workplace. And I think, again, that's harder to get done than it is just to read about or say with your say out loud. So bottom 142, it says, managers have a misconception that standardization is all about finding the scientifically one best way to do a task and then freezing it. This author, Imai, in the book Kaizen, Continuous improvement, it's impossible to improve any process until it's standardized. If the process is shifting from here to there, then any improvement will just be one more variation that is occasionally used and mostly ignored. One must standardize and thus stabilize the process before continuous improvement can be made. Okay, so you want to make this process better. It has to be the same for a long period of time so that you can see what those results are. Because even a most stable process will have variations that happen out of it, which are just normal variations. But if while I'm running that process, I'm also tweaking it ever so slightly, that's going to create additional variation. Well, now I don't know which thing caused which variation. Now I'm kind of chasing my tail. So standardized work is a key facilitator of building in quality. Um, Whenever a defect is discovered, the first question asked is, was standard work followed? And as a part of the problem solving process, a leader will watch the worker and go through the standard worksheet step by step to look for deviations. And at Toyota, the standard work is actually posted outward. I'll be curious to see if Subaru does it that way too, meaning it's posted away from the operator, and they're trained to use standardized work, but they don't have the sheet right in front of them, and it's churned outward so that team leaders and group leaders could watch the sheet and then watch the worker perform. So I'd be interested to see if Subaru does it that way. Says unfortunately, the role of quality department is often to assign blame for failing to follow the procedures when there's a quality problem. The Toyota way is to enable those doing the work to design and build in quality by writing the standard task procedures themselves. So you can imagine that the quality department probably can have this sort of contentious feeling like you're like a giant tattletale service that's going around trying to blame people for defects. Well, if we get quality built in at the moment the part is made or at the workstation, and we also get quality built into the actual standard work procedures because the person doing the work has provided the most recent Kaizen, then we're less of shame and blame and more about actually trying to get to the root cause. So 143 switches and starts talking about coercive versus enabling bureaucracies and this idea of employee empowerment. Again, when you recap on empowerment, a lot of people don't know what it takes for the employee to feel empowered, but one is they've got to know what they're doing. Okay, so I have to the person who's being asked to accomplish the task has to physically and mentally know how to do the task. So they have to know what they're doing. They have to be trusted to do it, meaning there's a sense of autonomy to it. They can do it when they want, how they want, etc. There's an autonomy to it. And then third is they're accountable for it. Okay, so I can tell you that I can tell you know how to do this and let you do it, but I've never hold you accountable. I didn't really empower you. I would hold you accountable for it as well, both the good and the bad. And so there's empowerment is tougher to pull off, I guess, than what I'm trying to point out here. So again, under Taylor's scientific management, workers were viewed as machines who needed to be made as efficient as possible through the manipulations of industrial engineers and autocratic managers. Okay, that's how it used to be. That baggage is what our current workforce brings to the table from their parents and their parents' parents and etc. But that also then creates these very rigid bureaucratic businesses where managers were supposed to do the thinking and workers were to blindly execute the standard procedures. And most bureaucracies are static, internally focused on efficiency, the controlling of the employees. They're unresponsive to changes in the environment and generally unpleasant to work in. So that's one of the bureaucracies. Most modern organizations try to be flexible. You'll hear the term organic used sometimes, meaning focused on effectiveness, adaptability to change, and empowering their employees. It's kind of the other extreme. So bureaucracy versus the other one. And what the author's going to do is say, no, there's really some ground in the middle. So NUMMI, which is the California plant, has many of the characteristics associated with flexible organization, extensive employee involvement, a lot of communication, innovation, flexibility, and high morale, and strong customer focus. And the TPS, the Toyota Production System at NUMMI, I'm over to 145 now, was proving that the technical standardization, when coupled with enabling social structures can lead to an enabling bureaucracy. So look at the graph on it's a figure a 12.1, and it's showing you how bureaucracy can grow, but if the social structure moves away from being coercive and more towards empowering, enabling, now all of a sudden we can have kind of the best of both worlds, is what it's trying to say. And I think this is one of the real challenges that Subaru has is, at the end of the day, there's so many different standard work descriptions and processes, and you have to have those for the reason we've been talking about. It's we have to stabilize those processes to then be able to improve them. It's quality built in right there at the workstation. All those things are important, but they generally are going to create a level of bureaucracy. And if we don't fight back against that with some additional social structures where innovation is celebrated and new ideas are fostered and developed, and learning is fostered and developed over shaming, blaming, and controlling. Like it's just such a narrow line there that I think it's really hard. It says the key difference between, this is bottom 145, the key difference between Taylorism and the Toyota Way is that the Toyota Way preaches that the worker is the most valuable resource, not just a pair of hands taking orders, but an analyst and problem solver. And so he called this democratic Taylorism. Over to 146, says to remain competitive year after year and continue to stay among the industry leaders, a company must have viable and enabling standards so that continually improve upon repeatable processes. So again, we've got to standardize so that we can just continue to improve from there, because that's what our competition is doing and what our customers expect from us. Talk about standardizing work for a new product launch. Again, getting an army of people involved. It doesn't give complete control to any group of employees, so we're spreading it out. So if we had just the engineers design the standards, that doesn't work. We got to have the workers come to a consensus on it. If we had every worker vote, then there'd be chaos and no consensus. So there's got to be this middle ground. And the way Toyota does it, they do what's called a pilot team. And I think Subaru does this as well. Workers representing all the major areas of the factory are brought together full time to an office area where, as a team, they help plan the launch of the new vehicle. And so, as you can imagine, over on the top of 147, there's a great deal of learning for team members on the pilot team about the design and production of the new vehicle. And when they finish their rotation, they are back on the floor as team members, contributing to and improving the standard work. It's kind of a way to look behind the curtain. Again, I wish I had a Subaru employee here that I could talk to him about that, to see if that's if there is that learning going on, which I think is really cool. Standardization promotes effective teamwork by teaching employees similar terminology, skills, and rules of play. It should be balancing the workload as well. Toyota engineers also make extensive use of design standards that go back to when Toyota first started. Within each section, engineering checklists have evolved from what has been learned as good and bad design practices. U.S. companies have tried to imitate Toyota's approach, but haven't been very successful, because they're creating large databases of engineering standards, but without success. I love this line. It says, capturing knowledge is not difficult. I can pour a bunch of knowledge into a database. The hard part is getting people to use the standards in a database and contribute to improving it. That's the magic. And that's where a person has to feel comfortable learning, being vulnerable, know they need to learn, have resources to learn, be celebrated when they apply something new. Like that's the organizational culture part. Standardization as an enabler. The critical task when implementing standardization is to find the balance between providing employees with rigid procedures to follow and providing the freedom to innovate and be creative to meet challenging targets consistently for cost, quality, and delivery. The key is to achieving this balance lies in the way people write standards, as well as who contributes to them. That's the magic of this whole chapter. That balance is critical. And it's the way we write them, who writes them, okay, and how do they fit inside our culture? Are they celebrated? Are the Kaizens seen as positive? The second point they make, the people doing the work have to improve the standards. Nobody likes following someone's detailed rules and procedures when they're imposed on them. Imposed rules that are strictly policed become coercive and a source of friction and resistance between management workers. However, people happily focused on doing a good job appreciate getting tips and best practices, particularly if they have some flexibility in adding in their own ideas. So again, super challenging uh, to to foster standardized work, which really should be about innovation and continuous improvement. But how do we make sure that it's not about coercive control, um, you know, only productivity concerns, that sort of thing. So, all right, so that's everything I've got. Um, Keep in mind that we will not meet next week. Next week, everyone is virtual because I wanted to give you enough time to get that midterm done. The following week then is spring break, so it will be, I guess, 2 weeks before I come back and see the folks on the night shift. So I'm around if you need me. Shoot me an email. Hope everyone's doing well, and hope this warm weather keeps coming, and we get out of the winter because I'm done with it. So thanks so much.